great introduction through the video. I'm going to just add additional texture as one of PACE co-directors, and long time I was active actually in all of the Getting Down to Facts cycles. So huge kudos to Professor Susanna Loeb, who can pull this off. I don't think anyone else can pull something like this off. It just gets bigger with each time, and to Nancy and Brianna and to all the staff who work with her. So again, the goal of Getting Down to Facts was pretty straightforward, but super ambitious, right? To provide evidence at this critical time on California's education system so that it could be a model of excellence for all students in the state and beyond. And I think it's important, as mentioned in the video, that California can be a model for the nation. It educates more students than any other state, and it really reflects the demographics of our country. And that's what makes the stakes of this, what we're doing here, even more important. Again, not just for our own state, but for the nation more broadly. And I would argue at this time, in our country more than ever. So before we begin, I'm going to add some textures to those ABCs as part of my keynote. But before we begin, we cannot pull this off, something like this off, without the philanthropic partners we had and also individual supporters. I'm not going to name them all, but this project really does require sustained efforts from researchers and practitioners and advisors. And we are so grateful for our philanthropic partners who were able to just really, invest in the idea of having evidence matter for the state, for our state, and continue. And I should say, as a person also who gets research funded and everything from researchers here or places like EdTrust West, that it's not just for Getting Down to Facts; it's consistent funding that we've had to be able to build the kind of relationships and the work that makes something like this able to be pulled off. So huge thank you. Okay. So again, up and down California, thousands of people are working every day. We don't want to tell an all gloom and doom story, right? We think a lot of our examples in these are also tell really promising stories about what's working well. And so again, across Sacramento, counties, districts, paraprofessionals, teachers, families are all working in roughly 250,000 classrooms across the state. And Getting Down to Facts has, a particular role in that effort, which is to synthesize what we can learn from all the data and research and experiences of people across these classrooms and schools. And so the goal was really of this latest effort was to take a stock of California's progress, both since the last Getting Down to Facts, but more generally, especially since a decade plus of LCFF, and to think about our progress, what's working, what are visible strengths, but also what are persistent barriers and challenges, and where could we learn to improve. And so that's where we're at. I would say there's also a particular focus on equity as part of this, right? So what works not just for some children, but for all children. And so today we're here to engage. We're not going to talk at you the whole time. We're going to have some opportunities to discuss, but really to see what we can learn from the research and what we need to move it forward. So again, as I mentioned, this is the third Getting Down to Facts, 2007. The first one helped us identify major problems in California's finance and governance system. All fakes? No, just joking. The second in 2018 was especially important, as you heard about in the video, was especially illuminated issues related to early childhood education and quite a few other topics. And then here we've taken on even more. I encourage you. How many folks have actually been in the website and looked at those 50? Awesome, amazing. I've read them all. No, I'm just no. I actually have touched them all. I think Nancy may be the only person, and Brianna, who've read every. No, Nancy. Okay, I won't put her. I won't. We're being recorded. All the briefs. Right. All right. It's a lot. It's a huge undertaking. All right. So as the video mentioned, the initiative produced many reports and briefs, and these collective findings are going to point to a larger conclusion, which I'm going to try to synthesize. But I do encourage you to look, and each of you have specific areas of particular interest. And so I guarantee you there's a research report about that area, since there's 55. And then there are kind of briefs that try to summarize across them. All right. So you've already heard them mention the ABCs. They help explain why these pieces do not quite yet up to the consistent results across the state that we hope to see for all students. And so what I'm going to plan to do is kind of the remainder of my time explain the overall cross-cutting findings of these ABCs and illustrate some of this particular research, for example, I'll specifically talk about curriculum and pipeline to college and work. But one of the reasons the ABCs work is because they do synthesize across so many different topic areas, which is what makes them work. All right. So across the studies, one finding that is really consistent is that progress has been made, but it is uneven. So implementation success is just too dependent on local leadership and local capacity. And when a district has strong leadership, strong staffing, strong partners, strong curricula, strong sense of state requirements, it may create those rich opportunities for students. But when those conditions are weaker or not existent, then those same state policies don't produce. They produce much less. They don't produce the same kind of rewards that we see in districts that have that type of capacity. And so that means students across our state experience very different educational environments dependent on where they are in school. So these three challenges that occur, we refer to them as the ABCs of California's current moment. A stands for accountability alignment, B stands for balance between state guidance and local control, and C stands for capacity. And together, these challenges help us explain why California's strongest examples remain more fragmented than systemic, and that's what I'll go into each. All right, so let's talk about accountability and alignment. So let me start there. California has very strong goals for its education system and multiple accountability tools and quite a lot of data, even if not always integrated, right? And the system now needs stronger connections among these goals, the evidence, and the data to be able to produce action, right? So part of the issue really is structural. California relies heavily on other entities, county offices, particularly county offices of ed, to oversee supports for districts. And many counties provide important types of support. But the structure also creates a lot of variation across the state and across counties. And a district's access to the kind of guidance and expertise it needs is really dependent on where it is located. So the accountabilities show a similar patterns, right? Dashboards, LCAPs, and report cards. They generate data about performance and about planning. Educators and families and communities and policymakers also need information that is easier to interpret and more clearly connected to what to do, right? To next steps. All right, so the goal of the system is when people can see what's happening, understand what challenges are and what to do to fix them or to be accountable for them, they are more easily able to improve. Okay. All right. So next, I'm going to talk about balance between state guidance and local control. And local control remains, I think, California's most important reform that we've experienced in the last decade plus. And it gives districts more flexibility to make stronger connections between the resources they have and what they saw they needed in their own local decision making. So, but for local control to work well, we need a clearer division of a sense of responsibility between states and districts. What can districts assume are the kind of supports that the state would provide? And the state is often better positioned to identify what works, to have built up evidence, to clarify priorities, and to maybe narrow the choices for districts among evidence-based practices, right? What are some common guidance and priorities that we can provide districts? And then districts are better positioned to understand their local context, but to be able to use those state resources. They understand what their community needs, what their staffing structure look like, but they could use that with better evidence from state about state guidance. So across the studies, and here there's quite a lot of different studies, both topically and about the governance and the organizational structure of our state, district leaders described a very difficult combination of, on the one hand, substantial responsibility at the local level, but also significant ambiguity and heavy administrative burdens to deal with within our governance system. All right, so in areas such as curriculum or tutoring or TK or math, and you'll hear more about math today, but not necessarily on the governance side, districts are making, big decisions about curriculum, about instruction, and often doing so with uneven guidance about what works and with little state support. And so the evidence base, even when it's really strong, is often not trickling to the local decision making that we know. So the next phase of local control really depends on making stronger, clearer decisions about what should be handled at the state, what kind of guidance, and what should be adapted locally. All right, C for capacity. California's goals for students have expanded enormously. I'll just give examples later about in curriculum alone or in college and career readiness alone. I'll give some examples. We could do this across areas. The state increasingly emphasizes really important things: whole child, civic participation, belonging, multilingualism, engaging with college and career and earlier grades. And these goals really depend on strong instructional systems, on prepared educators, on stable leadership, on access to resources and access to kind of professional supports to basically enact or to be able to act on these kinds of expanded opportunities that we are giving schools. So across the reports, across many topics, the support for such kind of expansive sense of what our education system, the promise of our education system, researchers consistently found needs more coherence and capacity, right? So capacity, I think of C as much coherence on that capacity as anything else. So district leaders described lots of crowded, less coherence in those priorities, uneven, again, as previously mentioned, uneven support, and just kind of limited opportunities for sustained professional learning across those, and, again, added sense of those goals. So the larger capacity challenge is building a statewide system that learns from effective practice and helps more districts to make sense of all of those reforms to be able to have the capacity to see their promise. All right, so this figure shows how the pieces all fit together. Again, California has really ambitious goals for students. Again, I mentioned some, academic learning more generally, but also, even in those we've expanded in topic areas in science and other in specific areas. Civic engagement is increasingly a key goal. Again, multilingualism. We've added really important goals for our students that we think will make them better prepared for their future. But to make those goals real for students, the system, we argue, needs this improved alignment and accountability, balance of state and attention to balance of state, local, and greater capacity of educators and institutions to meet the promise of those goals. And this will, again, the progress in any of these categories is critical, and I'm going to talk about them now with a kind of specific focus in mind, to give a sense of how the coherence of this argument makes this a promising direction for the state. All right, so this figure is again showing this ABCs, and I guess I want to, I'm going to start with them, but I'm going to focus on curriculum, and actually you're going to hear more in the third panel about from early childhood to high school, all through math. And I'm going to talk about it just more broadly around curriculum as it relates to kind of thinking about preparing young people for future of work and for college, a space that we're in. And as Lang mentioned, we have several reports on. So if we think about accountability and alignment, our state has great accountability around college and career readiness indicators. I was on those work groups. So there's a lot of discussion on the fact that it's career, college and career, not or career, right? And so we spent a lot of time thinking about an accountability related to college and career. That CCI is part of our accountability system. But high schools often, don't, as LEAs and school districts often don't have the best set of supports to understand how to reach that college, the CCI indicator of prepared levels for college and career. And the data, more importantly, haven't always been aligned to be able to support school districts in understanding how far their students are or what types of opportunities would help schools reach more students' level of preparation, or to know how they fare once they're in the workplace or in college, right? And so many high schools or many school districts on their own do some of this articulation, but the state has not really articulated. It's working on it, right? Has not really arrived at a way to be able to better tie data and evidence to those goals of college and career readiness. The balance on state and local, again, LCAPs, if you read them, there is a huge focus on giving students opportunities for preparation for college and work. But again, we in our work talk to lots of school districts to understand how they make sense of everything from dual enrollment to advanced math courses to AP to any number of kind of diversifying math courses that that is top of mind for folks now as they think about college readiness. And what we see on the top here, so maybe you guys can't actually see the visuals on accountability alignment. This is a picture from Long Beach Promise of a kind of upper elementary school kid looking at a map on how to get to college, right? So that's that sort of map to college. On this, on B, on balance, state, and control, this is a map of our state counties that shows this huge variation in degree attainment, college degree attainment across our state, with some states having less than 20% of the counties having any college degree. That includes even a sub-baccalaureate degree, like an associate's degree, to some, as you can see, the Bay Area is dark at like nearly 70% of some college degree. And so we have just huge, the demography of opportunity for college attainment is really a variable across our state. And then finally, on capacity, I'll tell you just alone in the last, if I just track this a little, we had everything from the California Math Readiness Challenge for school districts in 2016 to A to G completion improvement grants coming out of the pandemic in 21, college and career access pathways partnerships were both in 2019 and 2023, Golden State Pathways, regional K-16 education collaborative grants, master plan for career education. We've had a lot of efforts, state reforms, and again, this capacity of educators and at both capacity and coherence across those reforms from our work shows that there are a lot of competing priorities. And as mentioned in the video, challenges, teacher workforce challenges, for example, on some of those advanced courses, or even in CTE pathways. And again, wonderful reforms like dual enrollment and others can create some of those new opportunities, but there's a sense of what the capacity challenges for some school districts to fully meet the promise of things like dual enrollment. All right, so our work is just one. We have several reports. There's one on a primer for people who are interested in just sort of what does college coursework, college and career preparation look like. One of the reports does look at this. You're going to hear more about math later. This is just participation in college and career preparatory coursework for the class of 2022. The reason it's the class of 2022 is because we actually track them into college in the primer. So that's your teaser if you want to go look at it. Here I'm just going to show you their coursework, and so you can sort of see about 1 in 5 students complete in California in the class of 22 completed a CTE pathway. Nearly a quarter have some experience with college while they're still in high school through dual enrollment. About a third took some AP courses, up to 3 or more. 40% took at least pre-calculus. That's 3 or more. 30% took 3 plus AP courses. About 50% took at least one. And about 55% of our students complete the A to G pathway. Happy to answer any more questions about this. Importantly, I want to say this is by school. So the participation in all of those kinds of activities and course level pathways varies tremendously across schools. And so those are distributions of schools with the bulk, the 25th to 75th percentile in the box, and then the 10th to the 90th beyond that in the bars. And so you can see, yes, I mentioned about 20% complete a CTE pathway, but in some schools, nearly 50% of their students complete a CTE pathway. Similarly, and this is often we get questions about A to G, right? In many schools, A to G is the dominant, right? It is the majority of students who complete an A to G pathway. And so we look in this primer, we look also at school differences. I will just sort of say, as I close out and move to our next speakers, our report looks a lot at kind of using administrative data and what our students are taking. But the brief that looks at kind of high school more generally, very importantly, also captures really important data that we know about the developmental phase that is high school, and how our high schools are also not necessarily meeting our students, not all, right? It's not all bad news, but our high schools can go much further than just these course pathways, but to much deeper learning opportunities that meet the developmental phase that high school students are in. And so I encourage you to look more broadly if you're interested in kind of upper grades in high school, both at the work that Linda Darling-Hammond and Helen and Mordina Yang and others do on also examples of high schools where we actually have evidence that high school students are engaged in deeper learning opportunities beyond just sort of taking AP courses or a pre-calculus class, that really are places like linked learning opportunities and others where students are engaged in a deeper level beyond just kind of what Linda calls like a factory model towards college. And so I encourage you to kind of look at a richer than just college course taking data. All right, so before I get to turn it over to others, the bottom line that we want to suggest is, again, that we want to build on stronger foundations. It's not all, it is sobering, I agree with Ling, but it's not all bad news. California has stronger foundations, bigger, better goals, but also, important resources and visible examples of where this is working, and that the next phase really is about greater coherence, clearer priorities, more useful guidance to school districts and counties, and stronger reciprocal accountability, right? Stronger capacity to learn from that. And the opportunity that we see is California's progress depends on creating a stronger system for learning from improving practice in schools and district levels to extending these opportunities for all students in our state. So with that, I think I am turning it over back to Brianna. Is that right? Okay, great.